This is Jeremy Zwinger with the Rice Trader, just doing our weekly summary of the TRT. Of course, this is the December 10th TRT report. So just getting into it, what's happening this week? It's actually been a bit slower. We see the market's already going into a bit of a harvest, or holiday mentality already. Of course, the big news of the week is the Philippines. A lot of action going on there, of course. We've seen the remainder of the 320,000 G2P be awarded in Skandinavia 2 and Olam after some wranglings, especially on the Olam side, where they appealed and got 4 lots approved. So it's been very interesting, the NFA tenders, and there's clearly a lot of above clear things happening and some things happening behind closed doors that are affecting the flow of trade there. It continues to be a wide variety of origins the rice is coming from, but largely obviously Thailand and Vietnam. The 28,000 from Myanmar is surely interesting as we move forward. But really the origin of this rice is of course affecting the market, which is where you can see in prices. You know, Pakistan, of course, it's got some currency issues as well, remains at about 360 on the high end. India is at 370 on the high end. Thailand's next at 392, and of course Vietnam seems very high at 405 for the Asian origins. That's just a massive spread you don't see very often in Asia, and part of it is these tenders, of course, the other activity going on as well. And while we say that the market's really about the Philippine tenders, you know, we've done our adjusted data. You know, there is active trading going on, as we've said all year long. I mean, last year was a record, and we're only about 1.43% behind last year with the 5 majors. So the market is focusing on the Philippines, but obviously there's a lot more going on than the Philippines. You know, of course, we see China affecting the markets greatly by coming in and exporting significant amounts and not importing as much. And this remains a key factor as we go into the new year. You know, China's been aggressive, they seem to have good crops, and stocks are going to probably build into the 2019 year. So this continued competition in rice and the other major grains is going to affect things. If I move kind of to a different field, you know, oil has been of great interest this week. It seems very, very fascinating. We've seen Qatar leave OPEC. We've seen Russia say they're going to cut output. You know, with prices going down to the $50 range per barrel, you know, it's been very affecting to the global politics level. Definitely in countries such as Venezuela and other places that need at least $50 a ton or a barrel to fund a lot of key government activities. Obviously, this does translate into cheaper production costs if these values stay through the production season. So this oil thing needs to be continued to be watched. And what does happen with OPEC? Are cuts really going to stand like have been stated? In addition, of course, the current issues, just to maybe not talk about them, but the current issues politically in Saudi Arabia, I will be watching very, very close. There is probably a lot more instability that could occur there than is being reported, and I would not be surprised to see some action in that region, which could affect all of us depending on what occurs. Outside of that, what is interesting for us? I mean, obviously the TRT is a very long report. There's key things per the countries you work in, but I would like to highlight more of the key things. I would also say the U.S. has been very, very interesting, partly due to the stock droppage this week, but just politically it's very interesting. As the Chinese-U.S. trade war continues, this indictment of this key official from China, this Chinese company, is probably destabilize things as well. We need to watch that very closely. This trade war is a very big deal, with the Chinese having a huge and growing trade imbalance with the U.S. And if somebody comes in and really shuts that down, it will lead to massive instability. And you know, the elections are obviously passed in the U.S., and like we predicted, you have a split Senate and House. How that rolls out over the next few weeks will be very interesting. And as we've said too, the way we read it, a farm bill is going to probably be done in the lame duck session. If anything odd happens, there's just very few days left. And that's what I would watch. Yes, a deal has been struck on the farm bill, but it's going to be the 10th on Monday here. And there's only maybe 7 or 8 days of business left, with, of course, the unfortunate death of late President Bush also taking up some time in Washington, D.C. So a lot of these deals are struck, but let's see what happens. More concerning to me is NAFTA. And a lot of talk with my key group that NAFTA probably is going to have to be renegotiated. And this is a major deal. I know the Outlook conference was also going on here this week, and we've gotten a lot of reports for there's been talks on. This NAFTA and CAFTA deal that's allowing imports to increase is affecting this region and globally. You're seeing imports from Asia come in aggressively. Mexican market share of U.S. has gone from 99% to less than 70%, which will be showing here next week in a Mexican article. So these opening of trade agreements puts the U.S. at a huge disadvantage, and that's going to affect this region and the global trade. But I do think, just to end the point, NAFTA will not be approved like was hoped. You're going to have a new president in Mexico that'll have to re-go through this, and you'll have a new group of senators and congressmen that'll have to approve it on the back end. So unless we see a quick deal in the lame duck session between now and early January, you're going to have a renegotiation of NAFTA, which could very well happen. Outside of that, of course, we have a special section on South Africa and FAO report for prices. We are moving in a more holiday period. Next week we'll be looking at U.S. acres and monthly data, amongst much else before we move into the holidays. It does seem a bit slower, but really that's a perception before we get into the late December real slowdown. Activity continues, shipments continue, but that feeling is starting to creep in, or we all need a break, and trade will shut down here in about a week or two. So with that, that's all I really have. I wish you a good week, and I look forward to talking next week.